So he is not joining us, but we have the fantastic Nikki Chambliss in the house and Quentin Beckham in the house.
On a Monday.
On a Monday. Very, very excited for you guys.
Got some coffee.
On
Great
a
to be
Monday
here.
in December, Nikki Chambliss.
I know, it's crazy,
Right? The holidays, no matter which holiday you like to enjoy, right around the corner. We welcome you guys in the program with some discussion, all the agents on the show. Join us with some thoughts and some perspectives and some questions with two very talented ones, including what is undeniably a significant broker in the area that has many tentacles and many spaces of business.
You make me sound like Ursula the Sea Witch.
I feel
why
like
we
he's just a good guy. How's that? Quentin Beckham is who I was referring to, the man with the vertically integrated real estate empire. Judah Wickower is our director. We are live on all social platforms, and yes, I see some of the questions coming in here on Spotify and LinkedIn, which we'll get to in a matter of moments. Things look good on our end. J-Dub, so they look good on your end. If you want to grab this spot when you're ready with the mic, get it a little, that way we can see. There we go. And you look fantastic. You ready to rock?
I'm ready to rock and roll.
Sounds good. Judah,
Yeah.
we're in your hands, my friend. All right. Guys, good Monday morning. My name is Jerry Miller, and welcome to Real Talk with Keith Smith. Thank you kindly for joining us on a glorious Monday here in downtown Charlottesville. We're live across all social media channels, and today, Keith Smith and Yona Smith of Yes Realty Partners, a boutique arm of Keller Williams Alliance. I think that's a good description there. They are planning their 2023 business models. So Keith not in studio today as he and Yona put those forecasts together. However, we have two fantastic and fabulously talented real estate professionals in-house with Quentin Beckham and Nikki Chambliss. Judah Wickower is our director. We give him props at the beginning of the show, so we do not forget to give Judah Wickower props, our director. If we can go to the studio camera and welcome Nikki and Quentin to the program. My friends, good morning.
Good morning.
Good to see you guys.
Happy Monday. Yeah,
Happy
it's
Monday
great to
to
be
you.
here. It's always great to be here.
How was your weekend?
It was really good.
Yeah? Tell us about
it.
it.
Well, it was extra special because we had our Keller Williams Alliance holiday party, which is always a nice thing. And every year it's usually a different spin on things. So it was wonderful. We were at Tavola, and they're a lovely place, as I'm sure you know.
Yeah.
And it was a beautiful setup. Steven, what is his title? Like operations manager?
Sure.
I don't know. He makes things happen really, really well. Steven Allen, and he pulled this off, and it was amazing.
The Elmer's glue, if you may, of KWA.
Definitely.
Steven Allen.
There's very few events that he's not in the background on.
Right, right. He is very involved with KWA. First, I'm going to compliment you on a fresh haircut. Since the last time I saw you, I like it. You're looking sharp. Tell us about the holiday party. Godfather of KWA, Quentin Beckham.
It was just so much fun. They gave us the back half of the bar area, including the private room.
Oh.
And so it was a casual come and go as you please. We had 65 to 70 folks there, not all at once, I don't think.
Oh, that's a lot.
Yeah.
And it was a warm day, so we could use the patio area out back because we got that nice little bump in temperatures on Saturday. And there was just a lot of fun, and they always take great care of us, enjoyed it a whole lot. And it was fun to see people showed up with their kids as well. And so that made it extra fun.
Any tomfoolery? Any shenanigans at the KWA
Shenanigans.
Christmas party?
I don't know what you could be talking about. I didn't steal the baby, however cute she may be. I'm just saying.
You did not say that. Well, you
Did
have
not.
some of your
I
own
know.
already.
I do. but
Yeah,
They're
they're
bigger,
older.
And they're really cool, and I like them. But she was just so cute and adorable.
How was the temperature with your agents? The mood with their
It was good.
Their
Everybody
businesses.
was really happy. I got a couple really nice gifts of books to read,
Oh.
which I enjoyed.
Yeah.
Don't ask me to list all the titles. It was a long night. And we shut down the restaurant with about 12 of us left at the end of the night.
Who are the 12th? Nikki,
Definitely the
Quentin.
two of us.
Okay.
We were
Nikki,
two. We
Quentin,
were two
yeah,
of the.
Okay.
We were two of the 12,
I mean, it's
and
a
I'm
rough
going to leave
job,
it at
but someone
that.
has
Someone's got to do it. I would
Yeah,
be there
you know.
too if I was there. So
Well,
you
as
two.
a host, I have to be the last
You
one
have
out.
to, of course.
That's a requirement. Otherwise,
It is not because you like spirits and fun and
I
a
would have
little
been home by
revelry.
7 and in bed, like my usual Saturday night.
So-
Lee Elberson was there. He popped in for a visit.
Oh.
Several folks you know. Meredith, who we were talking about.
Oh yeah, Meredith Young. Here you're doing a
Yeah.
fantastic job.
Oh, she is. Yeah,
Yeah?
she's doing great. She's going to kill real estate. It's awesome.
I love it. I love it. So Nikki, show is
Yeah.
yours. Where would you
Oh
like
my
to start today?
gosh. Well, so I think I'd just like to start on what the comments are, because you said there are already comments coming in, right? And
We
I
do.
know we can't, there are always so many. The engagement is amazing.
Yeah.
So I feel like if we start there really quick, maybe we can touch on a few more things.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
So
Thank
this
you.
one right here is from a friend of the program. Sally, welcome to the show. She says, we're thinking about listing our house. Why should we list before Christmas, or why should we wait to the spring? Please ask your guest, Sherry.
That depends. I mean, that's always the answer when anyone period, but especially on the show, that's not enough information to really give any advice, truly. Do you remember the time that we were at, oh no, I can't remember her name right off. I'm going to remember it after we're done with the show.
Okay.
Was asking about an investment property and when to sell it. And we went through a whole lot of
Oh,
pieces
Carol
of
Thorpe.
the yes. We
Yeah.
went through so many pieces of the scenario where it was like, okay, this is positive, this is negative. And at the end, there was one final piece of information that was like, oh, well, in this case, wait till spring. Because they had a tenant in place and there
Mill
was
Creek.
the timing and
Yep.
it was like, oh, well, this final piece of information. But it took us a good, 5 to 10 minutes to get to that final piece, right? So it depends is not a flippant non-answer at all. There really is a reason that's a big go-to when we get these questions, because there's so many more details. So like, are you living in the home right now?
She follows up, Sally Young, keep the questions coming. We're actually doing a case study right from the start here. She follows up by saying this: yes, we are living in the house.
Okay.
We have our eyes on another property. We understand that the inventory is short, so we think our home could potentially stand out, and it's in good competition, or it's in
Nice.
good condition, excuse me, good
Wonderful.
condition.
I think one of the advantages to selling in what is now our seasonal market again is the lack of competition, on both sides of the equation. And if you're staying in your area, remember everything that's working against you on one side is working for you on the other, so it sort of washes out. And then it just becomes a matter of sort of discussions of what your personal needs are in terms of timing, why you guys are moving, how do we want to make this really, really work. What I do encourage you, if you're going to list it, do it before the snow starts. It's just way easier. The houses look better. And a lot of the small things that, in the hot market we might have not worried about so much, clean it up, make it look as good as possible. Because the only thing more frustrating than spending a couple $1,000s to make things look great is sitting on the market for 4 weeks.
Well said. Another follow-up comment, which is exactly what Nikki was looking for here. I do have to add, she says, that the house we're looking at purchasing, we need to sell ours to buy that one.
Okay.
So that's valuable information.
That is a really important factor, absolutely. So just being prepared, having your trusted advisor that is your realtor now, if you don't already have that, having your lender that knows what your needs are and that you trust to be able to help, and you can share all the important information to come to the best way to approach the scenario is really going to be key. And she already started with, she knows that inventory is short. So if this other home really might be, go check it out real quick, make sure it's really checking all your boxes, because truly in this market, sometimes it's kind of challenging to find a house that checks all your boxes. And we talk about that a lot on the show of, okay, maybe view your next home as a stepping stone. But if this feels like, ooh, this could be a really great fit for our needs and we're really interested, without more information, that sounds like it's worth checking out and seeing what could be.
Great answer. Quentin, what do you think?
I just like the idea that it's getting slower. The market pace, whether we're talking about now or spring or fall, the total pace of stuff, the frenzy has just backed down. And so, if you've got this place that's perfect and all the financing's right, but you still need to sell your home, just be aware of all the things you can do to sweeten that up, because not only are there fewer houses on the market, there's fewer buyers out looking. And so you do want to stand out and make sure you get some of that attraction. And be prepared that it may be a little bit longer to have all that wrap up than what than what we've been used to for the last 18 months.
Our friend John Blair giving you guys props. John, we love you, man. How many deals are you seeing, Nikki and Quentin, where the current homeowner needs to sell their house, the textbook domino deal, before buying another one? Is that a large percentage?
Well, I think so. I think there's always a certain percentage of people who need that to be able to do what they want to do. In the last 2 years, though, they've gone, ooh, okay, I'm just going to wait, because they couldn't, right? And it's not that it didn't happen at all, but it was very, very rare. And now those are coming back. We are seeing a little more home sale contingencies happening, because we really are feeling what feels more like a normal market. Still seller's market, right?
Still a seller's market, still shifted towards
Yeah.
sellers, but not so dramatically, because
Yes.
there's, it's all a supply and demand equation.
Yeah.
I think more and more we are seeing folks that needed to sell, wanted to stay in the area, and in the frenzy of the last 18 to 24 months, they didn't list their house because they were so concerned about selling their house and not getting the one on the other end of it. So I believe that we will see an uptick in those, because in the past you were fighting with people with no contingencies and cash and interesting overpricing amounts and stuff and complimentary seller possession and all this other kind of stuff. And that has fallen away to a degree that is really, really exciting, because we need a calmer, smoother market. It will move more things through.
Yes.
It's time for that. And it'll make the market correction less painful than what it could otherwise feel.
Jason Kirby's complimentary seller possession continues to resonate in the studios of the I Love CVille network over
Can
here.
you tell the sarcasm
Oh,
that kicks in? I've already told Jason he can't coin any new
He
real
can't
estate
brand
phrases.
new terminology.
Yeah.
Was the edict from The Godfather. Is that right? That is very right. JB Turner, welcome to the program, the mayor of Gordonsville here. This is an interesting question for you guys. Are all cash deals still prevalent with interest rates where they are, or have they backtracked considerably with this market cooling? That's a great question. What are you seeing?
Think about all of the other things outside of the real estate market that really stimulated those cash deals. We were in the pandemic. You had lots of money flowing in and extra money flowing in from the government to stimulate the economy, and nothing to spend it on. And it really did stimulate people using financial tools to generate cash deals. It was also one of the winning options when you were really in a hot market where there was 4 to 8 offers for a really good listing. So now all of that is backing off. We've got people being a little more conservative with their spending, not as much as you would have expected based on the last reports. Job growth is still strong, but we're starting to see that divide happen again, where the amount of money sitting in bank accounts is shrinking, and it's being spent on more solid day-to-day goods as opposed to American consumerism. And a lot more people with larger amounts of money are sitting on them, waiting to see what happens. And so the entire situation of the economy has changed, and I have seen and would expect to continue to see cash deals return to the normal part of the equation, where they're there, but they're not as common as what we saw in the last amount of time. And hopefully that will give people that need to have a mortgage, that need to sell a house to buy a house, and are using other tools to achieve home ownership, more breathing space to actually make that happen without taking years off their life.
You have, and Nikki, I'll throw it to you,
Okay.
Logan Wells Clayla watching of Howard Hanna. Welcome to the show. Nikki, what are you thinking?
So the way you worded the question, my answer was yes. Because it was like both, right? We do still see cash deals. I would say that it's probably what would be considered a higher percentage, and yet not like it had been, right? It's not just completely eating the market. And it's still what I would consider a large amount of cash deals. So it's both. It's slowed down a little, and it's still prevalent.
This is a great question, and I ask this one often. I'll throw this one to Quentin first. And Stephen, thank you for reminding me to ask this. And Kim Cornelius Spitz-Miller.
Hey, Kim.
We'll get to yours in a matter of moments as well. So they're starting to come in fast and furious here.
Yeah.
Stephen, for the panel, Jerry, you routinely ask your guests this question. The first-time home buyer, is this a more difficult market today than it was during the peak of the pandemic? Please ask your panelists this question. With interest rates as high as they are and inventory where it is now, it seems like it's still very difficult for a first-time home buyer to purchase a house in this area. Can they compare and contrast it to the peak of the pandemic? Who wants to touch that one?
So I don't mind going with that. So I want to throw in another factor, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So not just the peak versus now, but let's go back pre-COVID just a little bit. Let's go 18 to beginning of March, right, 2020, because that's a whole different factor. I feel like in that time period, being a first-time home buyer was easier than it has probably ever been, right? Just based on my experience, my knowledge. I don't have the data to back this, but I will say that there was the energy in the market was that, hey, anybody can buy a home, and that was really being proven true. People that didn't think they could, because there were a lot of programs out, whether it was down payment assistance or non-down payment programs at a high rate, interest rates were so low, it just made getting into that new home as a first-time buyer, a home, so much easier and simpler than people realized and thought. I had a lot of clients who, when we talked around it, were like, oh, I don't think we're in a place to buy a home. And when you take a look at the numbers and you pop a really great mortgage professional in that equation, and you say, hey, not only can you, but it's not going to make you house broke, right? Because nobody wants that. It's never a good scenario to end up buying that house, being so happy about it, and then not having any funds for any other aspect of quality of life. So then COVID hit, and it just was so competitive and so many cash offers, and there was just no chance for so many people to be able to be in that market, right? We went from in somebody's living room poker game to some high stakes thing, and we couldn't show up at that one for a lot of us, right? Now, it's still hard. Is it as hard as it was during the peak COVID? No, and it's different, right? So now we've got the interest rate factor. So now a lot of that same group of people that before, because of the low interest rate, could still have that same budget, quality of life, financial situation without bringing things to the table. Now it's a much smarter, longer financial conversation to save some funds up, to have a better debt-to-income ratio, to just really have a stronger down payment. Is it required? No, people are still having those lower pre-COVID life mortgages. And again, for that not wanting to be house broke, not wanting to have a mortgage that 5 years from now you're like, oh crap, I didn't mean to do that. And still being able to grow and thrive and be happy with the home you're in a low inventory market, right? So there's a lot of factors. And I would say versus COVID now is easier and it's different. There's a little bit of a shift there that's needed.
Well said. Great answer. Manu Fitness on Twitter is throwing up the heart emojis for Nikki Chambliss' answer right there. Fitness Manu is his handle. Thank you for joining us on Twitter. 15 accounts there. What do you think on that question, Kim, or Quentin? And then Kim, we'll get to your question next. Nikki, I'll give you a heads up on the question,
okay,
so you're prepared for that one. How do you view the short-term market for higher-end price point homes given the current interest rates? But before we get to that one, how about Steven's question on first-time home buyers in this market?
So for first-time home buyers, you saw them plummet in the pandemic. So if you go back to 2018, about 46% of all home sales were first-time home buyers. And so new construction, maybe it was current homeowners selling and moving up. And what we saw during the pandemic with the price accelerations and the competitiveness, it was extremely hard for first-time homebuyers to enter that market, in part because all of the market dynamics made it hard, but also because when you've never been through this before and you're planning on taking on all this debt and you're needing time to ponder, there was no time.
Right.
And there were very, very few resellers that were trying to, again, like we said, move in the same area. So we got a lot of out of state and a lot of longer distance moves and second homes, but that first time homebuyer market went down to about 32%. And if you look at data for the last 6 months, that's up again to about 45%. So we're seeing a return to that. So they're getting a bigger piece, a bigger share of a smaller pie based on the most recent data. And I would expect to see that continue. That's one of the things that I talk about, one of the things that I mean when I say we need a slower, smoother market, because just like traffic jams, if you have a moving freeway, it's easier for people to merge in. as opposed to a lot of the traffic jams in the backup and people just give up and take the surface streets. This is the home buyer dilemma when you're a first-time home buyer in a hugely outrageous pandemic market.
I love it. I love it. Agent questions are coming in now. Daniel Pettit of Real Estate 3, we'll get to your comments here in a matter of moments. I see a few others. I've promised Kim will get to hers next. Kim says this: how do you view the short-term market for higher-end price point homes given current interest rates? Maybe we quantify the higher-end price points as maybe jumbo market and above.
And what's the latest jumbo number?
I'll take a look at that.
Yeah.
I'll look at that while you
Okay.
guys answer.
I think it depends on, there's high end, there's higher end, and then there's high end. So I think in some respects, if you're talking the 1.5 and above crowd, these are
Is
still...
that the new luxury price point? Is the 1 million the luxury price point anymore? That's a question that comes up on the show often. I don't think I've ever asked you that question.
There's not a great definition for what luxury is.
Okay.
But if you want to start at something that's 2.5 to 3 times the median price, that's probably a good starting point.
Okay.
So somewhere around 1.3 and above.
Wow.
But it also has to have all the features that we think of as luxury. I can certainly find pieces of land and commercial buildings that meet that price requirement. And so it really does have to be higher end. You're paying for things other than just the value of the sticks and wood. So, so there's some contemplation about what luxury means. And honestly, it means different things to a lot of different people. If you're in the 1.2 and above market, there's still... We're seeing that go back to what it used to be, in that folks that are generally in that price range, they need a little more time. I don't know that the interest rates affect them as starkly, because as you continue to talk about who buys that and for what, that's less of a factor in their overall earnings. So if you are in a income level that is high 6 digits, a change in a mortgage rate of 2% is not that big a deal to your overall income, as opposed to if you're in an income rate bracket of like $65,000 a year. So, one, I don't like what it does to low end. But back to your question, I think we have the very similar market, and in many ways a better market than what we had before, because a lot of the folks that will be looking will have had time to think about it. They'll be much better prepared and a higher quality client. In those situations where we have homes in that price bracket, unless your personal situation is such that we need to have them on, I think spring is probably a really good time for you. We want those properties to show really well, because if you're asking top dollar, you want all of the landscaping to look good. You don't want people being afraid to wander around because it's 30 degrees out and nobody likes snow and ice. It's easier to do the showings. It's easier to have people see the property. The property shows better. And when you're trying to sell something as a luxury, it really needs to look the part. Everything's got to work. The door handles need to be fit. And that's something that might not have been as true 12, 16, 18 months ago, but it's becoming very true again.
Well said. Vanessa Parko, hello in Earlysville. Your thoughts on that one, and then more coming in fast and furious here.
Oh gosh, can you just re-ask that question one more time
The
for
question,
me?
sure,
Yeah.
from Kim. How
Yes.
do you view the short-term market for higher-end price point homes given current interest rates?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And Kim has a lovely home for sale, by the way.
Okay,
Nice.
maybe we
Okay.
sell it on the show right here.
That's awesome. No, I think so. Just kind of piggybacking off of what you were talking about, of that spring being key, and everything that Quentin said, of course, was very true about that luxury home. I think with the interest rates, though, the biggest impact is going to be seen in, yes, that need for, you really have to have all your boxes checked off for everything being in order, seeming luxury, feeling luxury, and it's going to take a little more time on the market possibly, right? I think that's just happening as a general rule. We're seeing that. We've talked about it on the show, and especially in that higher price point, just expect that. Don't go in thinking it'll sell in 5 days. And if it does, that's great. That's cool. That's wonderful. You just have to have a better longer-term plan, and I don't mean long, but everything feels long after the last, 24 months, really, right? So...
Neil Williamson, welcome to the program. We'll get to that Q3 retail report.
I want to say one more thing for first-time homebuyers.
Please.
Your financing options are actually improving. If you're watching mortgage rates week to week, they peaked on November 30th, and now they are coming back down. So they're starting to, your basic 30-year fixed APR is coming back down by 0.1%, here, 0.05, and they're decoupling and not being so closely aligned to the rate hikes from the Fed because they're not attached, they're not completely connected, and just like any other supply and demand, as we've seen mortgage applications drop, and they've dropped dramatically, banks need to stimulate that pipeline, lenders need to stimulate that pipeline, and so you won't see the mortgage rates continue lockstep with the Feds unless something new happens to change that, which I don't foresee.
Jackie King giving Quentin Beckham some props as we speak. You guys asked for the benchmark jumbo mortgage threshold. It is at 6.53%, which is down 25 basis points from a week ago. This time a month ago, the average rate for a jumbo mortgage was way above that at 7.31%. So it's dropped considerably. Here's a question I have for you. Then Dan Pettit, I promise we'll get to your question next on 1031 exchanges. The question I have for you is, with the drop in rates, which has been pretty considerable, why did we not see more stimulation with market activity?
I think a lot of that has to do with the seasonality that's coming back, right? Yes, the rates impacted and encouraged that. And I think we're all kind of just, tired of what has been the last 2 years. And I don't mean just like realtors. I think everybody. I think buyers,
little buyer-seller
sellers,
fatigue?
Everybody. We're
Okay.
just kind of like, let's just have a holiday season real quick. And if you need to sell your house, of course, you can sell your house still. We have low inventory. The people that are going to be out looking are going to be a much more serious group of people because they are taking that time when it's cold and when there are, family visits and all the things happening. But I think that's a huge part of it. We've just got seasonality coming back.
Is the winter buyer less of a kicking the tires, the proverbial kicking the tires buyer? Is the winter buyer a more legit, serious buyer? I guess shopper is a better word than buyer.
Okay, there we go.
I
Shopper?
don't think those are mutually exclusive things.
Okay,
Yes.
okay.
So, one of the upsides to buying a home in the dead of winter is anything tragic wrong with it is probably going to be easier to find. And
Why do you say that?
It's also one of the challenges. So, dead of winter, selling a home, the home's got to be warm. The gutters need to be clean. The sidewalks have to be shoveled and de-iced. And people walking in, if it's a windy day, which in Virginia, if it's cold, it probably is, because when it's the dead of summer and 1,000 degrees out, the air doesn't move. And the minute it gets cold in Virginia, it wants to just breeze past everything you're wearing and invade you and make you want to move. So
So it's the California boy.
odds are, yes, I'm not fond of
It's the California
windy, not
boy.
fond of windy and cold. And if it's going to be cold, I'd rather it snow, honestly.
Me too.
But it means that any time a window doesn't seal right, somebody walking through the house is going to be able to feel it. The house it gets dark at 4 o'clock now. Something else I don't like about this time of year. So every fixture has to work. All the lights have to be bright. You can't have that one yellow light in the chandelier. It's just harder to make everything look perfect. And if you're one of those people, like me, who doesn't want to decorate for Christmas, get over it. You got to put something up. And it's just a rough time of year to do that while we're doing all the things we normally do with family. And I think buyers are also foregoing doing that because they're thinking about moving. So they've got some real reasons to be super committed to the process. And they're probably not just looky-looing, visiting just to see houses.
Yeah.
So these are good things. It's slower. There's still buyers out there for listings, and there's still listings for buyers. But we're going back in time again, and it's not going to be frenetic. You just got to be aware of that. I want to go back to jumbo loans for a second.
Sure, please.
So if you don't know the definition of a jumbo, it's anything that is non-conforming and cannot be guaranteed by FHA, Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae. And so that current amount in 2002, which we think of as conforming loans, is about $647,000. So somebody buying an $800,000 house either has to have a conventional loan package, or they've got to have more than that $150,000 to put down to drop the mortgage underneath that line limit to get an FHA loan. And so it's once we get over that amount, you're in a different buyer demographic in terms of their options. You have different funding options, and in many ways, some of those they're harder to get, but they're also a lot more flexible. And so again, when we're talking about our 1.2, 1.6, 1.8, $2 million homes, you're automatically sort of moving away from the most typical demographic, which is an FHA guaranteed loan, into something else.
Great answer right there. Nikki, the winner buyer, Dan Pettit, you're coming up next here.
Yeah, I'm jumping back into the snow because there's another aspect that I feel you talked around, and yet when there's a foot of snow out, you're also going to, if it's sat for a moment anyway, you're going to see other challenges like leaks and, ooh, why is that just sitting up there on the roof? And, oh, wow, it looks like that tree might fall. And there are just all these other things that you're not going to see in the summertime. When it's rainy and I have to go show a home, or if it's snowing and it's safe enough to go show a home, because it's definitely hit some questionable spots before, when it was safe when I went, and when I came back home, it was, hey, I'm not going back out today to do anything else, because it's probably not safe for any of us to be on these roads. It's, you're going to see so many other things. You're also going to see pretty quickly, if it's snowing, is the road plowed yet? How high on the priority list are we? And yes, you can look that up, but seeing the reality of it is a whole other ballgame. So there's just so much more that you're going to be able to see in that home.
Dan Pettit, thank you for your patience, sir. Daniel Pettit asked this question on 1031 exchanges. Have you seen many lately? And he says, on how high do you guys think the rates will go, and how that's going to influence the market next quarter when inventory is going to be even tighter? It means the first quarter. So first one, 1031 exchanges, tax exchanges. Who wants to start on that?
I don't think we've seen any more or less of them. Again, part of the problem in the pandemic with the 1031 exchange is you have to build the entire process. And you've got to know where that money's going. You've got a limited amount of time to use it. And just like somebody that needed to sell a home to buy a home and didn't want to move far, far away, that complicates the process. It makes it harder to complete. It makes it take more steps and more time. And so it sort of functions like a contingency, because it is. And so in that 1031 exchange, the seller, in order to avoid the tax of capital gains, has to reinvest that money in another property. They've got a limited amount of time to do it. And if they're being well advised, you want to have a selection of properties that you could put it into. And we just didn't have the inventory for that. And I'm not sure we do still. We're still seeing them, and I think the opportunity for them is going to increase because, again, smooth market. It's easier to do the more complicated lane changes, and that's one of the ones that requires several steps to happen. We still did them in the heat of the pandemic and the heat of the market, but it was a lot more effort, and we couldn't just casually say, oh yeah, it's a 1031 exchange. It was, okay, it's a 1031 exchange. Here's all 8 steps that have to happen. Here's the person that is their trustee that's managing the exchange for them. These are the contingencies that go along with it. And if that offer was competing with 6 others, often that level of complexity was unsavory to the seller.
Good answer. The phone is blowing up with messages here.
And I always like any opportunity to use the word unsavory.
Unsavory is fantastic. Fantastic. Nikki, you want to touch on that? Or do you want to touch on the one that just came in?
Let's go on the one that just came in.
Okay.
I feel like you covered that so well. I don't think there's anything for me to add in that one.
This one's just come in via Spotify. Have investors jettisoned? Wow. Have investors jettisoned this market altogether? Michael Wood, with interest rates being so high and somewhat unpredictable.
No, I think it's one of those, most of the people that I worked with that were investors were smaller investors, right? They had smaller portfolios. Oftentimes they were working toward building that. I found some of my clients on Bigger Pockets and networking through that kind of environment, right? So in that group of people, they're always looking for the opportunity. A good third of them doing so with purchasing a home that they're going to live in and then knowing they need to move. Oftentimes military or some other type of transitional workflow environment. And so for them, there's still always that opportunity. And in any market, there's always opportunity, right? It's just more challenging. And depending on what your return on investment that you need, regardless of how you're factoring that, sometimes that's harder to achieve. I noticed that pre-pandemic, though. A lot of investors that I worked with directly, some of them who never purchased in this area, who said they really, really wanted to, passed up what would have been their best possible deals in a time where it's only gotten a little harder for them because they wanted a certain price point, and it just didn't exist in our area. So it really depends on who we're talking to and talking about. We are not one of those areas that tends to have those larger corporations who come in and swipe up a lot of properties. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but there are areas in our nation where it is a very, very high rate, where sometimes companies own large neighborhoods or almost all of them. That's not a thing that you see in our area like that.
What do you think, Quentin? Good answer, Nikki.
I think a lot of times we talk about investors as though they are a homogenous group. Another word I don't get to use often enough, and there's not. So if you're talking about real estate investors, there's a time horizon in that most real estate investors operate, and it's not short term. So the opportunities for real estate investment exist house by house, not market by market. And the whole point of investing is to move money forward in time without it losing value, meaning you want it to make gains. If you think of how our market is operating and you're in a position to buy a house and turn around and rent it, odds are you can rent it for more than the mortgage and everything else is going to cost, and you're creating this asset that's not going to diminish from the moment you buy it. Nobody buys cars and trades them well. It's a bad idea to buy. It's a bad idea to buy cars.
You're an anomaly, my friend.
It's a bad idea to buy cars like you're going to flip them for a profit,
But you have, though.
But it's a pretty good idea to buy houses, and understanding that regardless of what today's market means, how long are you keeping it? What's the time horizon? Because so long as somebody's paying the rent on time, the rent is covering your mortgage, the excess over that is covering a good property management company like Allied Property Management,
Suzanne
so
Real?
that you have
Absolutely.
less headache.
That was nice.
If you're that kind of real estate investor, market by market doesn't matter, it's house by house. And you need to think of it in terms of that house and what are your personal goals. And if you're really just using it to plan for a retirement, you just need it to take care of itself. You don't even have to have cash flow off the top of it. And even in today's market, we have investors that are buying and switching out properties and creating cash flow at the same time. So Deandra, who is one of my favorite investor
McDonald?
clients, yes, and
Yeah.
we've done stuff with her for a long, long times. This market is not discouraging to her, and she's been in it long enough that she's got a good idea about it. And that's the kind of investor that I think looks house by house. If you're talking about real estate investment trusts, REITs, that we like to talk about, and corporations buying large amounts of properties, there's not a lot of that out there. It's really a small percentage of the overall market that is owned by corporations. And most of the ones that are owned by corporations are large rental communities, which we need. And they're the right people to own those, the vast majority of the time. So your larger investors, I think, probably don't have any great answers right now, any more than I do, because so many things are in flux. You know, we're seeing predicting changes again in the price of oil and gasoline as the Russia caps come in. There's still supply chain issues. We still have a strong jobs report, and we're still seeing wage growth, which means the feds are going to hike the rate again.
True.
And it's just a matter of whether it's 25 basis points or 50 this time around, probably not 75. That's not what they're telegraphing, and they like telegraphing so that we can adjust in advance of the change. So depending on who you are, real estate investors means different things. You're probably the kind that's looking house by house. And we have several agents that have made that a part of their plan, where they buy houses that they can see, touch, feel, and drive by. They hire a company to manage it. They get in good renters, and you're providing a service to the community to somebody that probably couldn't live in a single family home. And please be a good landlord, or hire a good company to be a good landlord. And they're paying that down and creating equity for you that's not just the reduction in the mortgage rate, but the increase in the value of the house over time. If you're keeping a house for 5 to 10 years, you will see an increase in value, barring some really horrible political, social event that none of us could predict.
That was excellent.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was absolutely excellent. You want to add?
I'm not sure. Like I just.
I'm so sorry, the coffee
that was
kicked in.
awesome.
That was
Yay.
excellent. That was excellent.
Caffeine. So no, because I think investing is still. We've talked about this, right? On the real estate business side, I'm a huge fan because I feel like it's one of the best ways to change your life and your future. Unless you've already got something that's just really amazing, which in the job world, I don't feel like it exists in the same way today that maybe it did 10, 15 years ago, right? And then on the other hand, investing in real estate, I just feel like that is part two of that, at least for my personal life and plan. I just think it's a really amazing way to change generational wealth, right? To be able to go from having no investments, nothing as far as, my overall value. Because truly, if we looked at my life from a financial standpoint, before I owned a property at all, and you look at a little bit of debt, there wasn't a lot there, but a little bit. Some of it's student loans, right? Because that's the world we're in.
The norm, yeah.
Right? My value was less than zero, right? Technically speaking, as far as a financial standpoint. And now I have two properties, both purchased pre-pandemic, that have both increased in value wonderfully, that I will not let go of. When I buy my next property, I will probably live in that one and rent my current one. And I will just keep doing that all day, every opportunity I get. I just think it's a wonderful thing. It also gives great properties for people to rent because I know that I'm working with Ally and that they're being treated well and that they're not in a slumlord situation, right? So I just think it's a really win-win situation, and you have to be smart about it. I always find it interesting when people think that I'm a risk taker, and then when I lay it out for myself, I'm like, okay, I get that. Yeah, I'm a musician, a motorcyclist, I'm a real estate business owner, but to me, those are very well calculated risks, so they're not really risky, right? You do that kind of thing all day, every day, and does it feel risky to you?
As long as the tenants are in place.
Right, yeah.
And
Which
Suzanne
brings up a
Reel,
good point,
why don't I give her some props?
Yeah.
Yes.
She's Ally Property Management. Suzanne Reel is managing one of my condos, and she's fantastic.
Yeah.
So if you need a property manager, this is now all three of us have highlighted Ally Property Management and Suzanne Reel.
And I'd like to point out that sometimes because we're able and maybe even really good at being a real estate investor, that doesn't mean that we're able and really good at being a property manager.
Oh, for sure.
Oh, gosh.
And so if you're out there and you're going, I had an investment property and I hate it, it was probably not the investment property, it was probably the process of managing that property, being able to qualify tenants, and how do you follow all the rules and the laws and make that a positive experience while getting good tenants in there. And it's possible, but it's a completely different skill set. I'll go back to Deandra again and how she has shared online on TikTok. You can find her on Facebook. Her whole process of how did I move from just having investment property to becoming a good landlady and a good landlord, and what does that look like day to day? And it's not always super glamorous, and we get confused about those roles. One is not the other. You don't have to do both, but you have to be willing to pay for that second set of skills and all of the systems that need to work around that. That being said, just like our person earlier who was talking about selling to move up, everybody talks about how hard it is to be the first-time home buyer because merging onto that freeway is the hardest part that requires the most attention and holds a little bit of risk. Once you're on, things get much, much easier. And so that opportunity to create wealth and retirement income for you later on down the line is there once you get into the game. And the best time to be in the game is earlier. We can talk about markets, highs and lows, and we can do that all day long. Nobody that bought a house in 1980 is regretting it now. And the 80s were particularly interesting to buy a house in. Nobody that bought it in the 90s is regretting owning that home now. Nobody that bought it in 2010 is regretting owning that home now from a simple financial perspective. So rates are decoupling. It's a great time for first-time home buyers. Look at all those options and think past 1 year.
Yes.
Think to year 4, 5, 10, 12. A lot of creating wealth through homeownership is about fixing that housing cost and holding an appreciating asset compared to all of the depreciating assets that we typically hold and spend our money on.
Cars?
Cars.
Except in your
Like cars.
scenario. Elena Mangione has given you some props. We love you, Elena Mangione, quite a bit here in the studios of.
And Elena was
Siegel.
at the party too.
She
Yes,
was.
she was.
I
Yes.
would imagine she was one of the 12 that closed it down.
No, she
No?
was not there at the end. No.
Okay. I thought you would be there,
I'm not
Elena.
going to out the other 10 because,
I totally get it.
You know how I feel about outing people.
Totally get it. We totally get it. Travis Hackworth has got something for you. He's giving you props. Quentin Beckham, he's watching in Danville, and he also says this: just as the investors in real estate, meaning homes, are different than commercial investors in real estate living space, are historic in nature, are much more different than new property investors. He's basically describing the difference in investor mindset. Handful of folks are asking us, and this is such a tough question, and I would imagine you guys get this question all the time about where the rates are going to go. I mean, how often are you guys getting this question? A handful of times a week here? I mean, it's top of everybody's
Yes.
mind. Who wants to touch on this? Just wait
I'm
and
going to
see.
let her start.
I have no idea where they're going to go.
I don't think anyone
I know,
does.
Right?
Right, yeah.
I do feel like we have hit a point where if they went up a little bit, yes, does that impact people? Absolutely. And we're in a different market. They should have never been as low as they were for so very long, economically speaking, right? And we also know that, who is it? Is it the Freakonomics guy that talk about econs are the fake people that economics is all built around? Because that actual person is not really who any of us are.
Okay.
Because it's assuming that everyone's rational, and that's crazy town, right? So just, I don't know. And I think that any amount that it would go up is not going to kill anything. Does it mean a shift? Does it mean maybe having a little more, like we talked about earlier, in down payment, or maybe taking a pause and reevaluating a situation? Because yes, it might be a risk, but you really want to be really well informed, and you want to know what your 5+ year plan is, whether it's your own personal home purchase or an investment. And then if it went down a little bit, that would be nice. That would help things out with being able to get those first-time home buyers, especially, back in that market. Whatever we're going to do, there's going to be an ebb and flow that will continue and always has been and will be. I don't think that we're in any sort of a place where, and personally, I'm not crazy concerned. And when I say personally, I mean my goal of buying that second investment property hasn't happened yet, and I'm reopening that as part of my next 2-year to 3-year plan and figuring out what that's going to look like. So I'm not saying this from somebody who sits and just works in real estate. I say this as a person who is evaluating the market, deciding where I want my next purchase to be, right? So I'm not disconnected from this in any way.
Very nicely said. You want to add to that one, Quentin, on the
I
interest
mean, we
rates?
can't.
Do you get that often?
It's a common question, and one of the several crystal ball moments that we're asked to do is, where are the buyers and who's going to buy it and how long? How much money am I going to get for it? Which is one that we have the best opportunity to tell you, understanding that it's a snapshot. What we said 12 months ago is not what we would say today. And where are interest rates going to go, and how much am I going to have to pay for this? And I don't think we're at the top of the interest rate yet, but I don't think it's as bad as as you think it's going to be. So if you look historically at interest rates, we're not going back. I would be astonished if we go back even close to the 10, 12, 14% interest rates. I don't even think we're going to top 7 by the end of the year again. And I think you guys had a bet on 8.
Kevin Yancey and Kevin Higgins bet Scott Morris 8%. Actually, it might have been 8.5%. And it's nowhere. And Scott Morris said it was not going to go anywhere near that. I think both Kevin Yancey and Higgins have conceded, and a bottle of Ragged Branch coming from Kevin Higgins.
That's right.
And a bottle of Crown is coming to Scott Morris.
And if you're following, we're seeing those rates start to tip down. Inflation is starting to tip down. And I think until inflation and the Fed rate gets closer or crosses, they're going to keep bumping those rates. So they're not done, and they probably won't be done next year. And we're probably not going to have as hard a landing as we thought. There's still strong job growth. There's still strong wage growth, even despite a lot of the big layoffs you're hearing about. And we are going to have that equilibration, and I would not be petrified of where the rates are going. If you're thinking, oh my gosh, I have to buy in December because in April, which is when I'd really like to buy, it's going to be too expensive, it'll be a little more expensive, maybe, but probably not enough that you have to run out right now with a limited amount of inventory, short time on your hands, and the holidays around the corner, and do it if your original plan is still March, April, May. Stick to your original plan.
James asked, do either Quentin or Nikki see price points dropping in Central Virginia?
Yes.
Well, give us some more on that.
Not by a ton.
Yeah, there you go.
Not by a ton.
Why do you say that?
Why are
I appreciate the honesty there, Quentin.
mortgage rates going down?
Because demand is dropping.
There you go.
So you're seeing demand dropping, which is going to mean price point competition, which is going to mean price reductions. And as price reductions happen, maybe they have a domino effect.
Yeah, but and I think we always have to qualify this. We get this question a lot in the last 3 months, and I feel like a broken record. The price gains that we had for the last 2 years were stupid, outrageous. So things coming back to reality is not anybody losing money. It's just things coming back to reality. And so what that's going to look like in the data is a price drop. But when you understand the insanity that was the price gains, nobody's losing any value in this. The homes are not losing any value. Yes, there was a moment where you could make an extra $10,000 to $20,000 on your home, and in some cases, 50, 80, 100. That moment's over, and if you didn't win that lottery, I'm sorry. What we have is a return to more normal stuff, and it will look like price diminishment or a slowdown in that value acceleration because we're comparing it to something that's just crazy insane.
I respect the straightforwardness. Nikki, your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't disagree, and I feel like today's energy. I feel like a lot of people are starting to realize, hey, the national picture is not my local picture. So what is my local picture? But I do feel like over the last couple of months, a lot of people have had a lot of strong feels around this conversation that has made it so much harder to have. Because when you try to say that, and you try to say, hey, we're not talking about something tanking, that's not the conversation at all, because that's not reality. Definitely not for our area. I don't know other areas as well, and I don't need to, nor do I care to at this point, right? When I expand there, I'll let y'all know. But so that's made it, I think, a challenging or a more challenging conversation to have. And I think it is still with some people. It just depends on where they are and what they're thinking the market is that we're in. And being able to have some of this data that we present, whether it's from NAR, because they have some great data that's available to anyone. You don't have to be a realtor to log in and go in and see a lot of the information they share. If you just Google NAR and data or statistics, it'll take you to a whole plethora of resources. Now, the way people have conversations around that data and interpret that data, I think that's where some of the conversations can be a little stickier. And yet, just being able to see and know that you have access to that can sometimes be a really helpful thing. CAR has the same thing. They've got some local data that they share, and it's open, and it's available, and it's wonderful.
This question came up last week, and it's interesting. It shows how closely the viewers and listeners follow the program. Guys, you said last week that the lock boxes are going to change. Can you put in perspective how that could or should or would impact real estate in Central Virginia? So would you guys offer some perspective on this? Keith mentioned this kind of in passing following the board meeting last week. I believe it's a new lockbox system, a system that's been used in other footprints. The Fredericksburg system utilizes the lockbox that you guys are moving toward. Mm-hmm. Any insight that you guys can offer on that?
I mean, it doesn't really change anything, especially on the consumer side. It changes the ease of sharing access from the realtor side, which was still available with our current system. I just don't know that it was widely known, and I don't think it was intuitive. And the system, from my understanding, I haven't looked into either of these in detail, but I've worked in areas where they both exist, and I do feel like the system we're moving to is just a better quality service and offering. So I think that will take a little bit of that weight off of the realtor job or their admin or director of operations, which is always nice. When you're able to have better tools, it alleviates other aspects where you may need a little less leverage, or it'll give you room for more of what you really rock at, right?
Jake says, will this give more access to agents outside of the CAR footprint?
We already still have the ability to do that.
Okay.
This will make it simpler and less complicated because that's already happening, right? People already come in the area. I ended up making a realtor friend in Northern Virginia. She had someone that was looking in her area, right, in their footprint, and had this one outlier and wanted to show the house. And so we connected. They ended up not being interested at all and going back to the original area, but she wasn't at the point where she wanted to refer a thing yet, right, which is still always a great idea. And so she came down and showed it, and in the other system, she still was able to get access. It was definitely an aspect of that. I just don't think it's laid out as well in that system, right? So it's an improvement in system, which may then lead to people feeling a little more open to that. I do think that in that conversation of access and out of area, that whatever realtor you're using, being knowledgeable in where you're looking is so important.
I think that's kind of what they were
That
getting
is the
to.
key.
The-
And from buyer
the
side
agent
and the
outside
listing
market.
side,
Yeah, outside market agent watching saying, could this lead to more outside agents working within this market, is what the illusion
so
is.
that just depends on, that's totally up to the clients, right? Because if I'm a buyer and I've changed my area that I'm looking in and my realtor's still wanting to go help me in that area and they don't know that area well and aren't having conversations with me around their, I don't know, what they know in that market, to me that should be a red flag, right? And that doesn't mean they're not a great realtor. I get it. But referring somebody when someone's interested in an area that is outside of your scope of knowledge and what you do day in and day out. And some agents, like I have an agent who really does know various areas outside of the car footprint incredibly well, right? So it is a business by business situation.
I like it. You want to touch on that?
And I think there's a lot of points that drop into that skill set. You know, one of the code of ethics rules is that we will not try and represent people in either the purchase or sale of a property if we're not competent in that property. Some of that can be attached to geography, but some of it is property type. So if you sell farms, if you sell vineyards, if you sell commercial, a lot of that is apples to apples with very, very limited changes. One might be a green apple and one might be a delicious red, but they're still apples, even though they're crossing a county line and going a bigger distance. Whereas if you're in specific neighborhood communities and HOAs and those sorts of things, that might not be so geographically inconsistent. I think it's incumbent on the agents as they move to become really knowledgeable and remember their fiduciary. And it's so much easier to do that now than it was 25, 30, 40 years ago when some of the original ideas of geographically lined out associations came into play. So certainly, if you put me in Georgia, my opportunity to know a whole lot about buying and selling property there is pretty limited. If you ask me to help you buy and sell a property in Waynesboro or Harrisonburg, probably just fine.
Yeah.
And I'm always going to be willing to ask for help or to hand it off to somebody smarter than me if it gets complicated. And if we do all of those things together, we can continue to serve our clients the best. What you are seeing with the low inventory is buyers are they have to look over a broader geographic footprint to find the things that they need. And realtors are responding to that to become more educated, to have a broader swath of agents or buyer's agents on their teams or in their brokerage so that they're not having to lose that business in a shrinking market.
I'm also seeing, because of the low inventory, extremely aggressive marketing and branding campaigns from agents pursuing new markets because maybe their business in their current market is shrinking a tad. I'm getting, our house particular is getting hammered with out-of-market direct mail.
And there was a day and age when a realtor could make their entire living off of a neighborhood. They just worked a neighborhood, and that may still be true in some neighborhoods for some agents. But even as we've watched homes at the lake, which is a pretty defined geographic home territory, even as we've watched the market there change from where you might have 80 homes on the market at any given moment, and now there's 10.
Yeah, the 20s, I think, last I saw.
So the change and the reduction in inventory, which is the big piece of this that's not going to change soon, is changing how we do work. It's changing how we sell homes and buy homes, and it's changing how realtors interact with those clients. Add in technology to that, and your opportunity to get really good information as a realtor goes across a broader swath of land than it used to. And as you see inventory be small, transactions go down, we all expect there to be a reduction in the number of real estate agents in the state. So I'm not being doom and gloom. Everybody knows that because it expands and contracts based on the size of the market. As we see that go down, realtors that are really committed to doing a certain number of sales may have to spread their geographic territory a little bit, and I don't think that's a bad thing.
I agree.
Travis has got a comment for Nikki. Does the return to normalcy she referenced mean a return to affordable for the majority of people or a cheaper home for the upper levels of Charlottesville?
My first thought on that was, were we ever in a place where we were affordable for the majority of people? Truly, and I'm not trying to be contrary at all, but I don't think that we ever have been. Definitely not in my history of being in real estate, and that, long-lived compared to some and very, very short-lived compared to many. I got my license in December of 2016. And I think that from the very, very beginning, I quickly learned that affordability is a challenge, and it has been this entire time, and I feel like it has shot up increasingly so in the last couple of years. So I think that will ease up some. That's what I was talking about with that whole the first-time home buyer availability. And it also helps any more affordable housing need. So that's easing up some. Is it going back in time fully? No. And even going back in time fully, this area for the short time that I've been here, or even going back to when I first moved to the area in 2008, the cost of living here was something I was surprised by. I was shocked. I moved here from, where was I? Tampa, Florida, and showed up. And because of the way that this area is, where you're also competing with homes that are being rented out to students and all sorts of other aspects, but to me that was the big learning curve, where you have 4 students paying so very much per room, we couldn't compete, which was why we went and started at Lake Monticello. That was not the initial plan.
You and your family?
Mm-hmm. When we first moved to the area, the plan was actually green, and we really couldn't even find that there. Just being closer to NJIC and the military-related communities, we ended up going to Lake Monticello, which also has a strong presence of that same military community as well, because we're kind of scattered, not having a base. So I think that it will ease up, and I don't know that we have ever been, and nor can we, I don't think, just based on the basics of economics, have much progress in the affordable housing conversation. It's going to take something much bigger and outside of that economic system to help with that.
I think that was a great answer.
Yeah.
I respect that very much. I don't want to call it a dream, but as Niels pointed out on the Free Enterprise Forum, when building permits in Albemarle County are taking 90 days, I mean, that's right there an example of the red tape that's slowing this market down, which is making everything more expensive.
And that issue is very near and dear to my heart. Like I have a lot of strong feels about it, and I'm very passionate about it, and I don't have answers. I do feel like we have some really amazing people, like Neil being one of those, and part of the real estate community that is also passionate about it, and it's going to take more.
And he says, and Quentin, you responded, so you're multitasking extremely well tonight. Quentin Beckham is spot on. Economic development, economic vitality matters for everyone in the community. Reduced regulation equals increased economic vitality.
When we talk about, and I want to say again the separation, there's housing affordability, which is not the same conversation as affordable housing, which has a capital A. Mm-hmm. So in terms of housing affordability, when rates come down and prices slow down, while wage growth and job growth continues, that economic vitality that Neil's referring to makes housing affordability better, because the wages are outpacing, people are not losing jobs, the opportunities are there. One of the big caveats in that is the inventory. And when we understand how much of a supply and demand situation affects pricing for housing, and we see how low these inventory levels are, even though it's slowing down, because they're still really, really low, making it easier and faster for developers to get houses on the market is your first best solution to housing affordability. The more we work on housing affordability, the smaller the gap gets for affordable housing, which no matter how affordable the average home gets, we're still going to need government help with that. There's just not a good way. There have been too many things happen over the decades and centuries that have made a K-shaped separation in those who can afford housing and those who cannot. And a lot of it was based on those who were allowed to have housing and were not. And it's just played forward over time because much like housing is a good investment when you play it over time, when you're not allowed to have it, you lose out on things over time. And so that gap is very, very wide for marginalized communities and certain demographics. And we do need and should have some manner of weaving together all of the many nonprofits and the government organizations we have to keep increasing that opportunity.
Travis says, this is a good comment, and then we'll get to the NBC 29 story over the weekend that a couple people are referencing about December 2022, showing that rents are going down in the area. I'll send you guys a direct message, a DM on that NBC 29 story that people are referencing. First, Travis's comment that the economic development in our area should not only be dependent or handed off to the University of Virginia. Economic development should also be other realms of development besides just UVA. Do you want to touch on that one at all, Nikki? Then I'll send you that DM.
I mean, I can't disagree with that. And I will say, so this is an area where some of the ways that UVA and the city and the counties all work together to make progress is not an area that I know all the details of, right? I do know that with the way our area is laid out and with the UVA being such a strong presence, I do think them taking some of that responsibility is needed. And depending on what perspective and what day you're talking about, some days are better than others and how that works. And yet I do feel like there is an established relationship that does help there. And then with the area being the city of Charlottesville, and let's expand into Albemarle, they impact each other greatly. And yet they're different government systems. They're different deciding factors in how they decide to either increase real estate tax or deal with road situations and, right? So I think that collaboration within our area is really, really important. And I also don't have an answer to that either, right? You're not wrong.
Yeah, no, I think you handled it. I think you handled it very well. I think so much of economic development in our area, folks just turn and look at UVA, but we would love to see some economic development outside of that supply chain of stimulus.
And you know, it shouldn't all be UVA, but we should have all players at the table. Our economic system has many, many participants, and so you really do need a multifaceted approach to doing it. I think it's fair for UVA to do its part, and they're making really good steps towards that, and they've made and held true on some promises, maybe not as fast as everybody would like, but it's a big institution. Give it some time. We also need other institutions and organizations and nonprofits to keep moving their thing. There is no silver bullet. You must have multiple pathways to increasing the number of doors and the access to get through those doors, and that includes rentals or home sales.
Do you have concerns about UVA and the foundation buying so much of the real estate in Charlottesville and Albemarle County and removing these buildings off the tax rolls, which then puts more pressure on elected officials to raise real estate tax rates to make up for that lost revenue, hence making the area less affordable?
You know, I think sometimes we get so frustrated with the mystery of the first issue that we move to the second one.
Okay. What's that mean?
The first issue is the amount of regulation and the difficulty in getting from start to finish on development and house building and commercial interests and the sources of tax revenue that those generate. So if we did not have, and this is more doors everywhere for everyone, I don't care whether we're talking about building rentals, I don't care whether we're talking about single family homes, condos, townhomes, and denser stuff. Whatever it is, it's not going fast enough. And I think we just become numb to it. You know, and we see the housing permits when they get filed. We don't follow them through to completion where the number of units gets cut in half. And we don't recognize that the permits filed today are probably 3 years before there's a door you can put a key in. And much like our human nature is to go for immediate satisfaction, it's just hard to realize that the first issue is the limited amount of development and the length of time from start to finish that's adding $100,000, 25% of the total cost you're paying for is paperwork.
Yeah.
It's not a
It's crazy.
square foot of land. It's not one faucet. It's for paperwork. And that's before anybody makes a dollar off of it. And so I think it's easy sometimes to point to UVA as the big brother culprit in all of this. And they may have their pieces in it, and I do believe that they add a lot to our economy as well that we don't take into account, and we need to be fair about that. I don't know all the math. The first best solution is not to bullwhip UVA. They're going to do their thing. They're a big university. That's what they do. We need to be operating in the things that we can control. I don't work for UVA. I'm not in charge of them. But I vote in the city. I talk to the city councilors. We go through what are the steps. I talk about things with agents and on this show and at our associations. Grab the things you can control. Focus on those the best you can. And try to not get distracted by this red herring that is, we're going to expect them to just suddenly hand away homes for people. That's not what we need. We need the economic vitality. We need the reduced length of time from start to finish, less regulation so there is less cost, more doors because those doors create a more affordable situation. We're talking about rents coming down. Rents are coming down in the same way we're talking about home prices coming down. It's a supply and demand equation. There's also a lot of larger apartment structures just on the hub of opening or opened and expanding. And they're excellent options, and I'm really happy to see them there because it takes some of the pressure off the market and the inventory while still providing places for people to live. If it's not I know it's probably not your first choice for many families, but it's there. It's a choice in a market that is frequently having fewer choices.
Nice. Michelle McCarthy giving you props. Family giving you props. And Michael Beckham giving you some love right now.
Michael.
Rent's going down. This is NBC 29 over the weekend, and a couple of folks have shared this. I'll read the first few paragraphs and then pass it to you, Nikki Chambliss. Apartment List 2022 rent report says that rent in Charlottesville dropped last month. The site says the decrease in November was by 2% compared to a 1% decrease nationally, so 2x a drop in Charlottesville area. However, rent in Charlottesville is still up considerably. Listen to this stat. Rent in Charlottesville is up 14.5% since March 2020, and the average one-bedroom in Charlottesville area is $1,106 per month, over $1,100 a month, guys. The average two-bedroom rent in the Charlottesville area is basically $1,500. I'll get out of the way and throw it to you, Nikki Chambliss.
No, I think this is very, very similar. It's parallel to the conversation we were having about the real estate sales market, right? There are two factors that I think are main factors here. One is that 14.5% that we're still up. Not that we were up, that we're still up after a 2% drop. That's pretty outrageous, right? That's outrageous. And our community feels that as being outrageous. And it's dropping a little bit. I wouldn't even say that's balancing out because I feel like that would be an abuse of the word.
She's basically saying it's all relative.
It is
a 2% drop when you're up 14 plus points is still 12 plus points up.
Is that really a drop? Is that really a thing to, and I get it because I do understand we're talking about a drop, especially nationwide and then also even locally, right? Because our percentage of drop is higher than, we're higher than national, right? Did I get that right? Yes. And our increase over the last 2 years was also higher than nationally, and that's not here in front of us, but that would be a very easy stat to find, and we were definitely increasing rents at a much higher rate. So there's that part. Also, I think the other piece to that is part of what's coming back is seasonality. I think that is a factor in that. And whether we like it or not, it is what our normal market is. We have that seasonality, that ebb and flow. And after the last 2 years, I feel like I've learned that it helps keep people a little more sane. So I'm not when I first started, I was like, this makes no sense from the basic economic side of things. And I get it, but also it's like, why do we have this seasonality? It's because people believe that it exists, and so it does. And to a degree, that's true. And I do think it is a helpful part of the market. I have a definitely different perspective after the whole COVID life situation on that.
I love it. That was a great answer. Bill McChesney, hello. You want to touch on the drop in rents, the marginal drop? and then I want to give some props to the retail data that Neil share with us for Q3. First, maybe some drop in rents. Quentin Beckham.
I think one, Travis, when you say ED, you should really make sure people know that's economic development because there's a variety of definitions for that. So if
Use
you're
the
reading
context of the thread.
if you're reading any comments, just know when we say ED, we mean economic development. Secondly, we're seeing housing prices decelerate. We're seeing mortgage rates start to decelerate. It makes total sense that rent would decelerate as well.
Explain why.
Because we're in that same supply and demand situation. Remember that when mortgage applications drop, it's because people, one, have given up. Two, they've found places to live. That pressure is reducing, and we're seeing a return to that smoother flow. We're not having bidding wars for rental properties anymore, and we were. And this doesn't mean that, there's any big problems. And yes, rent is higher in the city. The city's how many square miles?
10.2.
Okay, so 10.2 square miles. How many people can live there? And we've still seen, it's even though the prices are decelerating, the house on Booker Street isn't suddenly half the price it was last year. So yes, all of those things can be true at once. We're still moving in the right direction, and we have lots of opportunity to keep affecting housing affordability with economic development, stimulation, reduction of regulation, and finding places to have more density that we can move through the political process.
Good answer. How about the Neil's Q3 retail report? You guys can find this on the Free Enterprise Forum. I think it was just released today, Neil, I want to say. Free Enterprise Forum for this information. Here's it very succinctly. Localities received $5 million plus more year to date than 2021, the Q3 retail report for 2022. What do you think, Quentin?
So I don't know if Neil's still watching.
He is.
Do you think that that's a big gain because it's looking at those gains after a big drop? How does that compare to pre-pandemic? Is there a decent comparison? I do like seeing it come back up because no matter what, we like those gains. That's taxes, that's jobs, that's investment in small businesses in the local community, and we like that. And it's a source of revenue that is outside of the real estate taxes. Understanding that, localities have a very limited purview in how they can collect money to do the things we want to do, and this is one of the ways. So we want to see that growth. It funds all the stuff that we want city government and county government to do, and I like seeing that return. I just don't know if this is back up to where we were here and we went down here. Are we back up to there? Are we halfway to there? Or are we above?
And the other question is, here's a question I also have for you, Neil. Is the increase in retail revenue directly associated with people buying more things, or is it associated with inflationary pressures making those things more expensive, which is driving up the cost of things, which means we have collected more money? That's what I want to know, because we know that inflation is what? 7 to 10%, 12%, depending on what you're buying. So if the price points are higher, obviously that's going to mean more money. Or is it actually an indication, to use your phrase, that more widgets were sold? Mm-hmm. That's what I would love to know on that as well, Neil. Your thoughts on, how about this, instead of retail revenue, maybe I'll take it a more broad, how you're feeling the economy is doing here locally from what you're seeing.
My feeling? I don't know how I feel about that. You want to?
When you talk about the economy a lot, on the national level, we're looking for softer landings. We know that we need to go through this adjustment. There's too much money that's been floating around, and that's creating some of the problems that we need to fix, and that's going to hurt. When I look at the sales report, when we're talking about job growth, unemployment, and wage growth, we have all the best signs to really do some good stuff and have this be a softer landing that is helpful to families at all ends of the income spectrum. Because what we don't want to see is this tip over to where you're seeing unemployment going up and wage growth stop, because we're still going to have expensive housing. the inventory fix is not going to happen in 6 months, but the jobs change can. And so we like this smoothness that we're seeing right now, and I think it bodes well. And probably just the reduction in choices is helping keep the small businesses that we have in town and surrounding us full. And so for those folks that have made it through to this other side, this bodes well for them and for our local community. And I really love small business. I love people that are employing their neighbors and that live in the communities where they run their business. They make better decisions for us. And these are folks that we want to continue to stay engaged and involved with local municipality leadership, because we can't keep looking to somebody else to fix all of those problems. We have to do things ourselves where we work alongside them and they are a participant.
Well said. Excellent. Show was a breeze today. Nikki Chambliss, I would love some closing thoughts from you. You brought your A++ game today.
Thank you so very much. I feel like like I shared earlier, I feel like the tone of things is starting to shift in a very, very needed way. Being able to take a look at our local market and better understand what the numbers mean for our area. And yes, it's not a bad thing to know nationally what's going on and what that larger picture looks like. Also understanding and becoming better acquainted with how to have that data conversation on our local level. And even sometimes on the show, we break it out for the localities within, because those are not always the same, right? City of Charlottesville is not the same as Greene County, is not the same as Louisa, Buckingham, right? All of those things have different nuances to what their market is experiencing. And I just really love the tone. And it's not just here on the show. Like, I'm seeing it in various environments. I had some meetings last week with a few lenders where it was really great to hear them talk around our local economics and what's happening in real estate in a way that was really well educated, and they knew their stuff. And it's just great to be in an area where this is important and key. Okay.
I like it.
Yeah.
Well done. Anything you want to close with? I think you guys did a phenomenal job.
Just that at CAR last week, we had a watch party from a documentary called Raised.
Okay.
And they pronounce it raised, but it's raised as in to lift up / raised, like you would burn something to the ground. And it documents Vinegar Hill and families alive today that remember living in Vinegar Hill and are standing in parking lots where their house used to be, and sort of follows that process forward. We had a watch party. We had probably 65, 70 agents in the room, as well as many online. This was part of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee's process to help us become more educated. And then we had an excellent panel that included Tom Woolfolk, who is one of our agents and also a past president of CAR, moderating, but also the two members that created the film, did the work, hunted it down, as well as a realtor by the name of Joaquin Wynn, whose family, on one side of his family, used to own a home on, I want to say it's West Main or that territory. And it was really educational. I encourage people to watch it. As we talk about our local politics and housing and affordable housing with capital A, I think it's really helpful, particularly for those of us that live and breathe here, to know the specifics of our history, how these things happen, and to be looking at the faces of the people that it really, truly did affect and change their trajectory. It was really informative. I was really happy they brought it. And if you're listening, look it up. Raised, and it's a documentary. I encourage you to watch it. It really helps add texture to a lot of the community discussions we're having.
I love
Pretty
it.
sure you can find it on PBS.
PBS.
Yeah.
And the link was actually just shared, vpm.org/raised. And I'm going to offer perspective on this. The raised is RAISED, So it's vpm.org/raised, RAISED, raised, RAZED. And then you will find this documentary that Quentin is referencing. This was a host's dream today. I sincerely mean that.
Yeah.
I mean, A+ show. When you guys see Nikki Chambliss and Quentin Beckham around town, give them props for just hitting a grand slam today and really making this super, super easy for me in this seat. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
I
I
sincerely
think it's
mean that.
incredible. I just saw what time it was, and I was like, it doesn't feel like.
Flies by.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I noticed it as well. Quentin Beckham and Nikki Chambliss of Keller Williams Alliance. The show is archived on realtalkwithkeithsmith.com. We also archive it on the I Love Seville network. Judah Wickhauer is our enterprising director. My name is Jerry Miller, and the I Love Seville show is up in approximately 45 minutes. Thank you kindly for joining us this morning. So long, everybody.
Awesome show. Yeah, that was
Ooh,
really
I
great.
love coffee. It just makes you sound so smart and like you want to know things.